So a dog, these are guys that play with their hair on fire. They're tough, they're competitive, they're physical. You throw on the tape, these guys are gonna stand out because of the way they play. I think that's what's gonna make you great, just you're a dog. And it's just channeling that when you do get to that point, and you guys should want the ball, you guys are good players.
What's up, everybody? It's draft time, my favorite time of the year, and we get access unlike any other show has ever granted access into pre-draft conversations, visits, and evaluations in Hard Knocks Episode 4. I'm Peter Schrager. This is the official Hard Knocks podcast, and today we're going to be joined by Giants Assistant General Manager Brandon Brown to discuss Episode 4. He's also going to give us a peek behind the curtain as one of the rising stars in NFL front offices on the process that led the New York Giants to their first-round selection of Malik Nabers. But let's not start in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where Nabers attended school, but in State College, Pennsylvania, where a familiar face, an ex, is there. Yes, standing there with his kids, embracing his former college coach, James Franklin, at Penn State's Pro Day, is now former Giant Saquon Barkley. And just a week after the what was really said, what wasn't said, how much money was offered, how much money wasn't offered drama of Episode 3, we see a happy and content Saquon at his old college alma mater, talking about the Giants' recent free agent additions with the team's offensive line coach, Carmen Bricillo. It's wild to observe seeing Saquon Barkley still warm with one of his former coaches and still invested enough to at least discuss the moves that were made.
Runyon's pretty good, right?
Runyon's smart, tough, athletic enough.
Left, you up him left or right?
We'll see. Like, there's some versatility in the room, and Runyon brings us some center flex as well, so that we needed that as well. Put John Michael on the backups there.
I'm excited for John, though. He got like a little leadership qualities.
He does.
In the clip, Saquon's rocking a Cher shirt as he turns back time with a former coach. Quick insider thing here, and this is for the Giants fans listening. John is, of course, John Michael Schmitz, the Giants' soon-to-be second-year center. And the fact that Saquon offers that little tidbit that Schmitz has some real leadership qualities to him is good details. Schmitz had an up-and-down rookie season, and a lot is riding on him this year. Saquon could just dismiss the entire Giants' offensive line, which A, didn't protect him so well the last few years, or Daniel Jones for that matter, and B, are one of the main reasons he didn't get paid by the Giants. Remember, they broke the bank on beefing up the offensive line instead of paying Saquon Barkley at running back. And then there's the Malik Nabers workout, and holy crap, this guy looks incredible. I'm not sure if it's the magic of NFL films and making everything look like poetry in motion, or if Nabers is just that physically gifted, but it is a sight to behold. This pro day looks incredible. Nabers is a beast. And Brian Dable says he's got a little dog in him, that there's edge there.
That guy's a stud on tape. Nabers got a little dog in him.
Yeah.
And then there's Malik describing himself.
Last night I woke up at 5. Oh, I said, man, I'm ready. I said, man, I'm ready.
Woke up at 5.
Woke up at 5, I said, I'm ready. This is what they came to see. I was like, this is what they came to see. They came to see what you can do.
The Giants are obviously very into Nabers, but couldn't go wrong with Marvin Harrison Jr. or Rome Odunze either. All three players, projected as top 10 picks, visit the Giants on the same exact day. Let me put my insider hat on here and discuss what 30-man visit is and just how significant that all three of those guys are in the room together. You see, teams differ on how they do their 30-man visits. Some teams like to give individual players their own workout, their own individual time with the coaches, owners, and GMs, and they spread them out over the month. And they'll say, okay, we're going to have Rome Odunze come in on Monday. We're going to give him the full treatment, take him out to dinner. We're going to have Marvin Harrison come in Tuesday. We're going to go to dinner with him somewhere else. And then, on Wednesday, we'll bring in Nabers. We're going to have 3 different days with these guys. But more and more, you're getting the type of group visit that you saw from the New York Giants in this episode. And the Washington Commanders came under a bit of fire this season for having all of the top prospects, quarterbacks, wide receivers, defensive players together on the same day, having them all interact together and then ending the afternoon by taking them to a local Top Golf to see how they would socialize with each other and, who knows, compete maybe in who can drive a ball the longest. People rolled their eyes, and yet that's what Washington opted to do. The Giants, though, more or less did kind of the same thing here, and I had no idea. It's an awesome visual seeing Giants wide receivers coach Mike Groh grill the top 3 wide receivers in the draft at once. If these 3 guys, who all do actually end up going in the top 10 of April's draft, end up as all pros or, who knows, Hall of Famers, this sight of all 3 of them in the Giants facility, sitting side by side by side, it's going to be revisited for years to come. Then comes a very interesting piece of tape that will be dissected 10 times over if things don't go the Giants' way and Malik Neighbors doesn't develop into an NFL star. It's owner John Mara asking Mike Groh if the Giants are on the clock, who he would take. Groh, a position coach who's not the GM, is not the one making the final decision, doesn't hesitate. Here's what he has to say.
So you're on the clock right now. You got to make a decision. One of those 3.
I take Neighbors.
Really over Marvin.
Even Joe Shane, sitting there in the office while the 3 of them are talking, is a little surprised by how quick and how much conviction Mike Groh has. Insider note here, I do the mock drafts, and I talk to a lot of GMs for my work with the NFL Network. I did a rather loose poll before this year's draft. I said to a few GMs, rank the top 3 wide receivers, and the majority of the people I spoke to had Marvin Harrison Jr. as number 1 because of his productivity, because of his polish, because of the bloodlines of who his father is. But the Giants, or at least Groh in this case, clearly saw it differently. And that's the beauty of the draft. Everyone's board is different, and there are no wrong answers until football is actually played. But then the quarterbacks come rolling through, and it's just candy for an NFL fan to watch. Without skipping a beat in a meeting room, Brian Daboll says that he would trade up for Jaden Daniels. And then there's Mike Kafka, the offensive coordinator of the Giants, saying, if you love Drake May, trade up for him too. But then the harsh truth of how few of these first-round NFL quarterbacks actually work out is revealed, and it's pretty chilling. The most revealing part of the episode is watching Joe Shane work the phones on draft day. He's wheeling and dealing. And even though he seems to know that it's going to be very difficult to move up in the draft, he is making the effort, and it is so interesting watching him get aggressive. We see how Elliott Wolf, the first-year Patriots general manager, is looking at things in their conversation. Turns out that Wolf is like, we don't have a quarterback either, so we're probably taking one. And that's why he's going to need so many picks for him to make that trade. And then we get this really awesome montage of Joe Shane 3 hours before the draft.
We got a deal in place with, well, kind of with Arizona. Chargers. We're set there, potentially. And then somebody calls when we're on the clock, we'll listen. But if it's Marv or Neighbors, we're turning the card in.
Can I interject here? This is great and all, but it does really douse all of those reports that the Giants were interested in J.J. McCarthy. The Michigan quarterback, who eventually did get selected by the Minnesota Vikings, 11th overall, was a hot name in the pre-draft buildup. At one point, there was a report that the Patriots loved him so much that he might be the 3rd overall pick. In my first mock draft that I did in mid-April, I had the Giants selecting J.J. McCarthy, the Michigan quarterback. I knew they loved meeting with him, and he was outstanding in their Easter weekend visit to Ann Arbor. Based on these conversations and Hard Knocks as a whole, it seems as though McCarthy, the national championship winning quarterback out of Michigan, was never really a legitimate possibility for the Giants. Fortunately for me, I got some good intel in the days leading up to the draft, and I pivoted to Neighbors on the mock draft that matters, and we can go into that. But for all the talk of McCarthy and Giants as a marriage in the month leading up to the draft, maybe those conversations did happen and they just didn't make the show. But gosh, J.J. McCarthy plays such a little role in this episode and the series as a whole. It seems as though there was a lot more smoke than fire with the McCarthy to Giants rumors. The climax of the episode comes with about 8 minutes left, and it's Joe Shane sitting down in his office and finalizing his plans and sharing the draft board with his two bosses, owners John Mara and Steve Tisch. Shane lays it all out, and then Brian Dable tells an awesome story. He called his former colleague, Nick Saban, who he worked for in Alabama, to get his take on this NFL draft class.
On the ride in, I was talking to Nick, Joe,
Yep.
Saban, and I said, hey, who's, the last couple of years, give me the guys in this draft, your top three. He's like, there's two skill guys that are fucking problems. And they were problems when we played them, big time problems. First one is Malik. He fucking went off on him. And then Bowers was the other one. He's like, fucking guys are problems.
So the backstory, Dable used to work for Nick Saban. He was the offensive coordinator at Alabama, and his quarterbacks there were Jalen Hurts, who's now with the Eagles, and Tua Tagovailoa, who's now with the Miami Dolphins. They had great success. He also used to work for Bill Belichick. So he's got this really cool deal where he was a Belichick guy, he's a Saban guy, he can lean on them if he needs to, but he also has chartered his own path. It's kind of his story as an NFL head coach. And he uses these guys in a great way. And in this scene, I think it's really cool that we see that Saban, the day of the draft, is calling and is like, Bowers and Neighbors, those were the dudes that crushed us. Like, I'm just telling you, those are the guys. Of course, Brock Bowers would end up going later in the draft to the Las Vegas Raiders, but that little Malik Neighbors nugget there from Nick Saban, it matters. As the episode wraps and we head to the final episode, Joe Shane lays it all out, and it seems pretty established. These guys are going into the draft, and they feel pretty confident that they're going to get Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison. And if they do that, they're bringing in the card, and they feel pretty good about the Giants. With no further ado, he's one of the fast rising front office executives in the NFL, and a guy that everyone around the league speaks so highly of, and we're getting a chance to get to know him on Hard Knocks. He's the assistant general manager for the New York Giants. He's joining us now, Brandon Brown. Brandon, what's up, man?
Man, Peter, it's been exciting getting on here with you, man. I'm looking forward to it.
I have to think, even you who knew you were going into this thing as being a part of Hard Knocks has been a little bit surprised with the massive response to this Hard Knocks series. Are you getting a little bit more notoriety than you expected?
Right after I think the first episode aired, I actually had a flight, go see family in Florida, and actually got a extra snack box on the plane. So that'd probably be the highlight so far. But for me, it's a little cringy watching myself, to be honest. Seeing what you look like, seeing how you sound. You filmed a lot of these things 3-4 months ago, and you're kind of reliving these past moments, with the fan base. So you just hopefully that, you're in the best light, that you didn't say or do anything embarrassing because you're mic'd for so long. But it's been great, and just really just giving everybody an insight to tidbit of what we do on the day-to-day.
Malik Neighbors is obviously the eventual first round pick for the New York Giants. Brian Dable zeroed in on him early at the combine. He's like, I stayed up all night watching Neighbors. We know that Dable obviously liked him, but you've also been the voice of reason in a lot of these episodes of like, hey, here's the full picture and here's the full package. There's a cool scene in episode 3 where there's this distinction between a dog, what makes someone a dog, and someone you want, and it's the Steve Smith types, and then somebody who might be a bit much. You've been weighing the balances of Neighbors talks, Neighbors has edge. How much of that conversation do we see on Hard Knocks, or was it a bigger conversation that's not on camera of, hey, this guy, he's got a little edge to him and he might bark at our quarterback if he doesn't get the ball?
Yeah, so Peter, I think that was a smaller piece of a larger process. So when you talk about going through the whole fact-finding journey with Malik, I think the first thing is giving someone grace. It's knowing, one, what their origin is, how they were raised, the adversity that they've had to overcome, who their support system is. And then two, highlighting the unseen work. That's the biggest thing with Malik. It's the love of football. And I think when we talk about, yeah, he's got dog, he's got edge, but this guy does work when no one's watching. I got to give a lot of props and respect to Tim McDonald, our director of player personnel, who was so integrally tied in to that LSU coaching staff. We got countless anecdotes and story about days off where Malik is in there catching jugs, running routes, doing the extra work where these aren't the things that, the average, call it scout or layman knows, but these are the extra tidbits because you're tied into that building. So it's almost like bringing the full, call it story full circle of, hey, this is what he's done. This is what we've seen on game day. but what is his process? You go from everyone sees the A and the Z, but like to me, like the B to Y of the nooks and cranny of what makes him him, what makes him tick, and how does he respond in those moments when no one's watching. And it's been really cool to say, hey, this is who he is, this is who we're inheriting, and this is how we help him be the best version of himself once we get him here.
It's awesome. And there's a really cool scene in episode 4 where Mike Rowe, the wide receivers coach, has the top 3 blue chip wide receivers in a room watching film, and they're sitting there, and it's Harrison, and it's Adunze, and it's Neighbors. And I know every team is different with their 30-man visits, but to me, this was rare air for us to have access to. What do you remember from that day when the 3 top wide receivers were all in the building together?
So, Peter, you said it. It's rare air. It's very seldom that you have 3 top 10 wide receivers in the same draft class that you can get in your building at the same time, put them through a day of onboard work, watching film, being in the meeting room, and seeing whose personality comes out, whose recall is sharp. And it was really competitive. If Rome got something right, Malik wanted to make sure he got something right, and then Marv wanted to do the same. And we go through that whole day with them, and we also did dinner with those guys. So you go to dinner with those guys and you start talking about stories, and you kind of see the competitive edge come out just in casual conversation, not even about football. So it was really cool, just a whole day, and it's really props to those guys for being up for it, and there was a camaraderie there too. Like they even said it. Give you a cool anecdote. They said, "Hey, we're gonna be not just today, not just this draft class, like our whole early part of our career, and hopefully all our career, we're gonna be comparing each other against each other."
No doubt.
Yeah, I just thought that was great for them to have that awareness, and they didn't run from it.
Yeah, look, and if all 3 are Hall of Famers, great. If all 3 are All Pros, great. But they will be the draft class of 2024. Those will be the 3 names, and you guys had them all in there at once. It seems like where the episode kind of comes to a climax here, Joe lays out the plans of the front office to Mr. Mara and Mr. Tisch, and it sounds like Harrison or Neighbors, and then there's a little bit of okay, and if they're gone, we can make some moves. We can still get Adunze. Is that how it was looking the whole way, or did that crystallize in the final days leading up to the draft?
It started to crystallize as we got further in the process. And I think part of it too was, you call it opportunity points for players, where strategy now comes into play. Now you can love guys at a certain level of degree, but then also it's where can you get them at the right price to get the right return on your investment. So I think when you talk about, Rome, Marv, Malik, there were different conversations of, getting this player at a certain point. Will they be there? If not, can you move back and still acquire them? And what that would look like. Try to get most bang for your buck. And I think really role and fit. Daboll uses the word generator a lot. I think that's why Malik was so attractive for us, was he's a guy that can hurt you vertically in the passing game, but he's also a guy that can hurt you with the run after catch ability on those underneath short catches, be QB friendly, and create on his own. So that combination of explosiveness, strength, speed really was a sweet spot for us, where we said, hey, let's not get cute. Don't mess around. If he's there, he's our guy.
Yeah, there's a scene where it's you talking with Mr. Mara, and it's just the 2 of you, and he pops in your office and he's talking about the stress and just how dramatic it was trading up to get Eli Manning. And I could see you're taking it in, you're soaking it all in like a sponge. A, what do you remember of that conversation? And B, in the moment, did you realize that you were being filmed and that this would air eventually a couple months later?
It's funny you say that, Peter, because the cameras are rolling so often, and really leading up to that conversation with John, we've been filming for over a month, where you kind of forget the camera there and you go about your day to day, and try to be organic as possible in all moments, where that was really just an example of our really casual conversations. It's a benefit of having an owner who's in the building, and you can have offline communication with him and conversations about roster building or past guys that have stuck. And to me, it's getting the information that allows you to make the best decisions. So having that conversation with John was really take me through the angst and the heartburn and the agita that you have when, you go through the Eli Manning situation. Because you want to make sure, hey, how do you recapture that feeling of, we got one and we feel good, and this is going to be our guy for the next 10 to 15 years, hopefully. So just wanting to relive that with him while we're going through the whole quarterback journey of saying, is there one for us in this class?
So great quarterback class. We saw 6 of them go in the top 13. As the episode was kind of crystallizing, it was Caleb, of course, is going to Chicago. We really like Jaden, and we really like Drake May. But we didn't hear much from the J.J. McCarthy side, the Michael Penix side, the Bo Nix side. As you guys were going through this, was it really just a three-man race at quarterback? And if you can get one of those guys, we'll see. But the other three weren't really on the radar as much as a playmaker like Neighbors or Harrison?
We took all the quarterbacks through the whole gauntlet at nauseum. You know, Peter, you hit it, you know, doing the private workout with JJ Easter weekend on Ann Arbor, you know, going out west to see Penix, having dinner with him, you know, having him at the Senior Bowl where Shay's coaching there as well. Same thing with Bo. You know, we had Bo in on a 30 visit and had exposure to him hands-on at the Senior Bowl. But when we, you know, got down to it, you know, there was a separation in terms of how we onboard them, what the return may be early on, then compared to the playmakers, whether it's Marv, whether it's Malik. And we felt great just from a support, a plan, you know, talking with Dayball, talking with Joe, the coordinators, that those top three quarterbacks you mentioned, along with both Marv and Malik, that would have gave us, you know, the best opportunity to really get off and run it.
I think one of the cool things of the show is we see the interactions that you guys have with each other. It's cool to see you and Joe Shane. What's your dynamic been like? And I know he just got here. You got here recently. You both had very decorated careers before. Is what we're seeing on TV, this great relationship and everyone working so symbiotically, is that what we see on day to day? Or is we're just seeing the best of the best on this Hard Knock series?
You know, Peter, I'd probably say it's, you're not even seeing the best of the best, to be honest. It's a rare relationship. The interesting part that a lot of people don't know is, you know, Joe and I never had a prior working relationship. You know, we've always just been on the road, whether it's scouting a game, being on a school call. We've always crossed paths. And I think, you know, I kind of say the evaluators evaluate the evaluators. And you know, guys that kind of have the, you know, the moral compass, the personality, the aptitude that you admire. And Joe's someone that I've always had high respect for from afar. And I think it's really a credit. And I think when you look at Joe and I's relationship, I joke with him and tell him, like, we're like peanut butter and jelly. You know, it's
ironically,
we share a wall, and it's not only in the office, but it's really organic because we've got to know each other just as people, as, you know, what is he like? He knows my family, I know his family, what he likes to do outside of the office. You know, we share a love for some classic 90s films. You know, you wouldn't know it, but Friday's one of Joe's favorite movies, and
let's go.
We joke and we quote lines from movies at the same time too. Like, it builds to being able to hold each other accountable. And when we have those tough conversations, we know it all comes from a good place. So as I said, it's organic as it gets. You know, there's way better, call it sound bites and clips that Joe and I have just on the daily, also with the rest of our scouting department, that you don't even get to see on Hard Knocks. But I'm glad some of it's been captured.
Yeah, it's been great. And as we wrap, I've been hearing about your name since you were in Philly. You got this great job in New York. You're coming off very well in this show. As you look towards the future for yourself, and odds are you're going to get interviews to be a GM, and I would bank on you and say you most likely will be a GM. What have you learned from this offseason as we're watching it all unfold that you can take with you in your next roles?
Yeah, Peter, I think the biggest thing that you see, it's validity in the process. There's no shortcuts. It's making sure, you know, you're seeing a soundbite of it or clips of it as synergy between coaching staff, the scouting department, having a plan, executing the plan, whether it was heading into free agency, whether it's heading into the draft. And then it's really just developing the staff. It's leading up and leading down. And, you know, leading down is giving your staff the platform to help and be inclusive in decision making, and then leading up in terms of communicating the vision to ownership and you know, alongside with the head coach, and letting them know that this is how we want to build out the roster, and these are going to be the plans and how we do it. And I think you saw in Hard Knocks there was a really, call it a bracket of benchmarks that we hit that were documented.
Yeah, the last question for me is a fun one. Who's taking the most grief in the building based on Hard Knocks? Who's getting their chops busted the most?
Oh, easily. I'm gonna go to Chris Rossetti, aka Air Canada. He's our resident Canadian, and man, he does a great job as our pro director. You know, he's a guy that's always glass half full. You know, he's been the punchline for a lot of the jokes, but you know, he's our local celebrity. I told him he's up for an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor.
All of you guys have become overnight superstars. Everywhere I go, I'm in New York. Everyone's like, "Are you watching Hard Knocks? What do you think of Rossetti? And what do you think of Dennis Hickey?" I'm like, "You know Dennis Hickey? You know that name? Yeah. What do you think of him?" I'm like, "Great guy. Knew him when he was in Tampa. Knew him when he was in Miami." But like, it has been that way, and I think it's a combination of the success of the show, the intrigue in the Giants. But as Joe Shane said last week, the lull in like sports stuff. So this is what everyone's watching.
Yeah, it's nice where you said like this is the calm before the storm in July. It's been a pleasure to be a part of, and you mentioned Dennis Hickey. He's our resident Silver Fox, and it's great that you kind of see these personalities on a bigger stage.
Yeah, dude, thank you. Thanks for joining us. I am watching you from afar for years. I am so glad we can do this on this podcast, and we really appreciate you being your authentic self, both on the show and here talking with us.
Peter, I appreciate you having me. And like I said, anytime now you're a friend of the program now. So, you know, whenever you need me, I'm here for you.
All right. Brandon Brown, Assistant General Manager of the New York Giants and one of the stars of Hard Knocks. Thank you, Brandon.
Thanks, Peter.
Brandon's great, and he offered us great insights. He's going to be a GM in the league. I'm pretty confident about that, which leads to our MVP of the week. I think the MVP of this week's episode is actually former Giants general manager Ernie Accorsi. See, Accorsi was a legendary NFL executive before his time with the Giants, having built multiple franchises before coming to New York in the early 2000s. And in 2004, Ernie Accorsi pulled off one of the biggest draft day trades of all time, swapping picks with the San Diego Chargers, moving up all the way in the draft to number 1 and selecting Eli Manning as a first overall pick. The Giants gave the farm, if you will, to get Eli, and there were a lot of critics. That draft would go on to have Hall of Famers up and down, Larry Fitzgerald, Ben Roethlisberger, Phillip Rivers. But you could argue that Eli ended up being the best NFL player of all of them. 2 Super Bowl rings and 2 Super Bowl MVPs. Here's Ernie Accorsi in the episode talking about the trade that changed everything for the New York Giants.
Now, we got hammered for giving too much, but there is no price that's too high if you're right.
It's been 20 years since the Eli Manning draft pick, and yet it hovers over everything when it comes to the Giants and the draft. And yeah, we heard Brandon Brown talking about the Eli trade, and he's speaking with John Mara in that really interesting scene where the two of them are together in Brown's office.
I mean, Ernie was absolutely sold on him. The thing he kept hammering home to us was he's playing at Ole Miss without a really good supporting cat, and he's still making play after play. What drew us to him more so than Roethlisberger was just playing in the SEC versus playing at a smaller school.
In the end, the Giants got Eli Manning. They won the Super Bowl twice, and Eli's going to be a Hall of Famer, and he went wire to wire as a New York Giant, didn't play for any other teams. It all worked out. In this draft, the Giants don't trade the farm for a quarterback. They stand where they are, and they take Malik Neighbors 6th overall, and they roll with Daniel Jones for one more season. And who knows, maybe many more seasons after that. It's really interesting seeing what could have been if the Giants could find a trade partner and how they get their heads around the fact that, nope, it's not going to be quarterback. This ain't going to be Ernie Accorsi's draft. This is Joe Shane's draft, and it's going to be wide receiver, either Neighbors or Harrison, whoever is there on the board. And that's it for this episode of the Hard Knocks podcast. Next week, it's the Giants finale and the moment the first 4 episodes have been leading up to. The draft, who they going to take? This off-season version of the show has really been incredible. So much access, so much drama, and so much range in music. This episode alone, we went from the Muppets to Eminem. Let's just say that I am fired up for next week. But until then, don't forget to check out more exclusive behind-the-scenes content at Hard Knocks Instagram page, which you can find at Hard Knocks HBO. If that's not enough Hard Knocks for you, and let's be honest, it isn't, head over to NFL.com. And as always, you can reach out to me. What are you hoping to see in episode 5? What are you looking forward to about the Bears Hard Knocks season? Let me know on X at pschrags, that's PSCHRAGS. Or you can hit me up on Instagram at P. Schrager, SCHRAGER. We'll be back to say goodbye to Joe Shane and the Giants after next week's episode of Hard Knocks, which airs Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern on HBO and streaming on Max. Thank you for listening. Talk to you next week. Hard Knocks Podcast is a production of HBO and NFL Films in partnership with Pod People. It is hosted by me, Peter Schrager, and produced by Buffy Gorilla, Tony Mantilla, Brian Rivers, Sam Gobauer, and Carter Wogan. Special thanks to Michael Gluckstad and Savon Slater from the HBO podcast team, and of course, Ken Rogers at NFL Films. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Drake May or Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors. I mean, you can't mess up.
Okay, and then Sid, who do you want?
All the girls want JJ McCarthy because he's good looking. That's it's the same thing with Madison.
Who do you want? I'm just looking at who looks like they would be a good quarterback.
Jaden Daniels, look at him.